Hello, and welcome to Noman Livestream. Today we're gonna have a special event to talk about the environment building in Alan Wake 2. My name is Kirill Tokarev. I'm the Communications and Industry Relations Director here at Noman. At first, I want to thank our sponsors, Dell and NVIDIA, for giving us support to do these amazing events. A couple of housekeeping notes. The stream is available on Noman's Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. If you like what you see, please like, share, and subscribe to our channels not to miss the future updates. A couple of words about today's presentation. Alan Wake is a very unusual game. It is a game that was conceived in Finland, built in Europe, and the story takes place in the Pacific Northwest. It's a game about light and darkness. It's a big game about the creative word and how it changes the reality around us. Um, I want to welcome our today's presenters, lead environment artist Anne-Lynn Sottas and senior environment artist Jeremy Cerisy, who are here to talk how they managed to put together the gameplay needs, the narrative needs in the wonderful environment art of Alan Wake 2. Please stay with us till after the presentation where we're going to have a little Q&A and they will be able to answer some of your questions. Thank you so much, and let the Alan Wake presentation begin.
Hi, hello.
Hello.
Let's start, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're ready.
So, welcome to our talk about Alan Wake 2 Between Reality and Nightmare and how we built the world of Alan Wake 2. So,
Just
yes. So, this game was developed by Remedy and published by Epic Games. I'm just going to do like a little background on Remedy. You know, we're here since 1995. We're both in Finland and Sweden. We're roughly like 400 people with many nationalities, 35 apparently. We're known for like games like Max Payne, Alan Wake, Quantum Break, Control, and more recently Alan Wake 2. We currently have 3 games in development. Firebreak being our next release, Control 2 developed with Annapurna, and Max Payne Remake developed with Rockstar Games. So we will be presenting this talk. So I'm Anne-Lynn. I'm a lead environment artist at Remedy. I've been here for 8 years now. I worked on title like my first title here was a Crossfire game. Then I jumped to Control, and then more recently Alan Wake 2. And before that, I was at Ubisoft Montpellier working on Assassin's Creed and Ghost Recon Wildlands.
nice. And hey everyone, I'm Jeremy. So I've been working at Remedy since like 4 years roughly, and I work on like Alan Wake 2 with Lynn. We both like work on different levels, as you will see in a moment. And I've been working in like video games for like 8-9 years, something like that. I started to work in games at Ubisoft NC because we're like both French, so that's the best place to start, right? Going to Ubisoft. So at Ubisoft NC, I work on the Division 2 and the expansion. And then I moved to Arcane Lyon. I work on Deathloop for a year and a half. And then I moved to Finland to work on Alan Wake 2.
So, Alan Wake 2. We're gonna, before starting, because we don't know if you guys have played the game or if you're aware of what we're going to talk about. So we thought of putting like a little trailer to refresh everyone's memory. So just a little trigger warning, there will be violence and flashing lights. So if you're uneasy with this, please skip the next minute or so.
Yeah, let's go.
The killer left the heart next to the body. This wasn't some random act of violence. This was a ritual. A page of text, written with a typewriter. Someone's been watching us.
How do you run from an idea? From a story that lives in your head? I need to escape this nightmare.
Wake says the story will change reality around us. Why are we written into this story? I brought you the Heart Witch. Show me the terror.
Show me the terror.
FBI, drop the knife!
I can't find my way back home since I fell down this rabbit hole.
Hi. So let's talk about a bit about the game. This is a horror story in 2 parts. One part is called Return, and it is the story of FBI agent Saga Anderson coming to a small town in the Pacific Northwest, Bright Falls, to investigate ritualistic serial killing that soon uncover a supernatural terror threatening the whole town and her loved ones.
And then you have another part of the game, which is called Initiation, where you're playing Alan Wake, as he's like trying to find his way out of the dark place, which is like a very inspired New York nightmarish version out of his books. So he's going to go for like a lot of horrors, a lot of weird stuff, right? Struggling to escape and to retain his sanity to go back into the real world.
A horror story in 2 parts, 2 opposite sides, twisted reflections of each other, 2 heroes desperately trying to make sense of the nightmare in order to fight the horrors marked by the darkness. The war between the forces of light and darkness, with a quirky, crazy small town, its battleground, and a hard-boiled film noir city where it is always 2:30 a.m. in the morning and raining, and a musical. So today we wanted to talk about like how we make games at Remedy, from like pre-production stage. How do we prepare our levels? Then we will have a production example to kind of give you, like, show you more how we do it. Then we will discuss like challenges we faced during this like 3 years of development.
Yeah, a lot of challenges.
Yeah. And finally, we'll give you some of our takeaways after finishing
Yeah.
shipping Alan Wake
Yeah.
2.
And a quick Q&A afterward.
Oh yeah, and a quick Q&A. Oof. So let's start with pre-production. And our art Bible, it's usually where we start. It's 34 pages by the one and only Janne Pulkkinen, our art director. It's so this is, for example, one page. It defines like the visual direction. It gives general guidelines of each key locations. So you have like a little text describing the mood and like usually a color associated to it, and it helps you build like kind of like a mental image of the place when you start working and you start looking for references. The picture references can usually come from like movies, pictures.
Yeah, no. I'll just have like a webcam issue, I think, but let's see. I don't know.
Technicality.
Yeah, what's like the live action? What's happening? Yeah, I guess we can just continue and let's see if it's going to come back. Oh yeah, sorry. Nope.
Yes. We have the same thing for Bright Falls, so a quick small description. picture photograph references. Same for Watery. And what I like with this already is that you get the general vibe of the 3 different locations in real world. You kind of already print like a mental image, you kind of visualize colors and shapes. Yeah, I think it really helps to give a direction when you start building the game.
Yeah, and so for the Dark Place, we also had some Art Bible pages, which is like super important, because the Dark Place is like a dreamlike logic place, which is kind of like very abstract, and everyone will have his own interpretation of what it actually means. And when we are like working on games and we are like several dozen on it, really super important to have everyone on the same page roughly to know what to expect of the vibe of the place, knowing the main inspiration. So here we have some screenshot from The Departed and Seven as like a main inspiration. And here we have also one of our main inspiration, which is Taxi Driver. So really trying to go for like this vintage New York vibe from the 70s, 80s, and not trying to do anything modern, for example. So again, like when we'll build the level later on, we kind of like know what the vibe that we want to go for.
And this art Bible also includes like archetypes. So props, for example, like Jeremy said, we don't want anything too new. Flat screens, we kind of hate those. We always tend to go for like props that have a bit more character and like feels like a bit more used and has more like storytelling. So yeah, it helps everyone to kind of get on the same page. This art Bible also includes like vehicles, patterns, text, branding, weather conditions, like lighting principles. Like there's like anything visual, basically from VFX to lighting to environment art to prop artists. Anyone could come and see where our art director wants us to go, and we kind of refer to it like most of the time during production. Another thing we did, which is kind of, I mean, it might sound pretty obvious, but we did a field trip to kind of look at the environments. And we were building a game about the Pacific Northwest. And so forests in Europe are not the same size. So it was very interesting for me, for example, to see like how the US really is. We took like 800 gigs of picture. We took buildings, like materials, any locations that we would stop by. We took also characters, people, really. So it's also a good base for our design process, where when we start looking at references, we can start looking at the pictures from the trip, and then we branch out to Google Maps, Pinterest, Flickr, Shot Deck,
Books.
Books.
Yeah,
yes,
books.
physical books. Let's do a thing.
Yeah.
Then usually there is a proof of concept. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, so the proof of concept is basically like a very like basic placeholder version of what the game is about. So we had a proof of concept version for like the real world with Saga. But here in this video here, yeah, we can see the one for the Dark Place. So it's very like super early, maybe like three years ago before the game release, just to get like a first glimpse at what the mood could be, what are the metrics, what kind of like issue can we encounter. As you can see here, like like the camera is a bit like crazy. But here we have a spot a nice shot. You go out of the safe room, you have a lot of shadows walking around. So it's really like a first pass of like trying out your ideas and see what is going to work. And then you can see what needs to be improved. Here, for example, you have the phone booth kind of like weirdly placed towards the walls. And you can see, like, I think that's right after that, like the camera is really like clipping quite a lot. So all of this issue that we might know like what will happen, but then you kind of have like a nice to-do list then for the next couple of years when you work on the game. But at least we have like a good idea of the vibe of the place. We understand like how to play the darkness. Here, for example, we don't really know where to go compared to the final game, but at least we know that like that's something we need to improve.
Yes, and we had one for. I think you
Yeah,
mentioned.
yeah,
but
mentioned it
my
for
brain-
for Saga.
Yes, as well.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, want to continue?
yeah.
Yeah, go
you-
on. No,
me?
go on,
Yeah.
go on. Yeah.
So usually we also do like a visual target, maybe called vertical slice in some other studios, to prove visually what we wanted to achieve. So some of the things, the main things we wanted to kind of research while doing this visual target is creating a realistic forest, because most of our game is forests,
Mhm.
and also like kind of researching the density of the forest, because well, it's something that we saw when we were doing the trip to Pacific Northwest. The forests are so dense and beautiful that it was something we really wanted to recreate. We also were trying the use of real world scale in our environments. We also wanted to check test like pushing detailing on our mesh to add more silhouette to objects and architecture. We also wanted to use photogrammetry pipelines, so kind of start. This was like a good playground for us to start thinking of all those topics. While trying to fit our learnings from the
Yep.
POC
Yep.
in terms of metrics, for
Exactly.
example.
So let's take a look at the video. There's going to be some sound.
The story needed many beginnings, many springs. Streams that turned into a river, a flood, and then an ocean. The story
Like research, you can see that the final game is actually way more interesting looking
Yeah.
than this one, but that's like super early, right? It was what, 3-4 years ago?
It was in 2020. It
Oh,
was in
yeah, so
summer 2020, and we didn't have like terrain tech.
Yeah. Yeah, because
or-
coming from Control with like super brutalistic architecture, like doing a forest,
Yes.
it's crazy.
we didn't have like any scattering tools. We were at the beginning of finding what we needed.
Mhm.
So I'm just gonna quickly go through like our production milestones, and Jeremy after that would give like a concrete example from one of his levels. So we have like a design phase where while level designers are building white boxes, we are looking for references, creating mood boards for the different locations allocated to us. So to help us, we usually have like a screenplay or like the art Bible. Placeholder phase, it's like, white box layout showcasing the size, shape, and scale of locations from the critical path. And spaces in which the main mission beats are set can be walked through and identified. There's usually like some temp lighting, usually some horrible point lights, but it does the job. Color box layout is our functional phase. Usually we have like color box layout showcasing the final size and scale of the location. The reason why we chose color box is to have a bit of like colors and some PBR values so that lighters can also start prototyping, because Alan Wake was such a lighting also heavy game. Lighting was very important. We needed also to support their work, and also it helps in the sense that you're not looking at a gray scene all the
Yeah.
time. Also the environments for the main mission beats are usually locked, and we start placeholdering like some small storytelling here and there. Then we jump to alpha. So each environment is representative of the final location. All the different areas in the layout are well defined and can be walked through. There should be no more whitebox props or materials or textures in the environment. We do a big decal pass with only like critical or big elements. So for example, think of like graffiti or gameplay decals. Then we usually do like a pass on the critical branding, and it's like first pass big environment optimization.
Mhm.
Then we jump to beta. So that's when like we have all final quality assets from in-house and from outsourcing. We usually have final set dressing for narrative spaces, and then we have done a pass for like medium and small decal, and usually a final pass on propping small details. And usually it's when also we do like final performance optimization pass. And polish, final extra polish. So it's usually maybe we're playing the game and it's like final tweaks, fixing like really like final tweaks, cinematic environment polish and material polish as well.
Yep.
That's
So yeah, now let's look at like an actual production example with like an actual level. I'm just trying to see if we can get back the webcam very quickly, but let's see if it's going to work. But I think it's it's on the website seems to be kind of done. All right, so let's go back to the presentation. So we're going to take the initiation 5, room 665, which is roughly in the middle of the dark place. If you play Control, you might remember the Oceanview Motel, kind of like the same like entity, since all the Remedy games are linked together. And when I joined Remedy and I started to work on this mission, we had some like early concept from like I think it was Journey who made these ones. So it's really like just exploration, visual exploration. It does not going to follow them in any way, but really helpful to just develop the look of the Oceanview Hotel. So here's like another concept. As you can see, it's like also like super heavily relying on the 3D. We also had like some building concept, again just like inspiration to try to see what we can do. Then we also read the screenplay, which is also something quite rare actually in the past production that I've been part of. But we read the screenplay just trying to understand the story, what the character are doing, what the character is talking about. Sometimes you have some like description of the environment. It's always like very broad and a bit abstract, but sometimes it's like a really very good source of inspiration. It's kind of like in a book, kind of like trying to picture something of the stuff that we are reading, and we want to see and understand, okay, so how can we make like justice to the writer's vision in the level. We also have a level design blockade. So here we can see one of the first version made by Admir. So you crouch through a chimney, you're going to have like a seamless teleport arriving in this lobby. I can see here we have like kind of like the flow of the mission at the end. It would be the same, but it would be like very, very different from that. Because here, yeah, since it's like design driven, basically you're just going to evolve in the level, but it's a bit right. It's not like artistically super interesting. So not something that we want necessarily to keep. Here we are gathering references. So what I like to do when you have a full level is actually you have your references ordered in a way that as you go deeper and deeper in the documents, you change location, right? So we are going to start from the exterior on the right and moving to the left towards like I think the last floor, the scratch room, which might be the last scene. You can see that here we have a lot of references. Obviously, like this document was built during like the 2 years that I work on the mission here. We don't have everything obviously from the start. But the goal is to understand like the vision of the designer, understand the need of the gameplay, the navigation, the lighting. Here we have a first art blockade. We're going to talk a bit more about it in a moment. But here what I'm trying to do is trying to find a cool visual and really trying to go down in like the specific look of like the hotel that I want to build. So I really go broad in terms of like preferences. I even went to like I think in Booking, for example, in the US, try to find like some kind of like cheap hotel maybe just to see how they look, what kind of like materials they're using, what kind of like furniture. Also like some dark place, we got stuff that I found on Pinterest. All of that could be really interesting because you never know what might actually be as useful for you. And the goal then is really to extract as much ideas as possible because you will never find the perfect references. But what you can find is just like, hey, I like this lamp, I like this wall, I like this rug, right? So trying to extract all of the ideas. One thing that is also super, super cool is the movie references, right? So here, for example, we have the Dark City, really nice mood. For example, we really like the kind of like archive for the reception, was kind of cool. Then we have like seven big source of inspiration. Then we have this is The Shining. If you play the game, you might remember that the bathroom might look a bit similar, right? And then there's like way more, obviously, but I didn't put everything here. Also trying to look out for props because we're going to reuse like a fair amount of generic props from the game and from like other levels, but we don't really want to make sure that we have like the specific props that people will expect from an hotel. So maybe like the key rack, the trolley, the suitcases, that kind of stuff that we might not already have in the game. So we really want to make sure that we're spending our time and our budget into like meaningful like asset that will help us to make the best location and to serve the story in the best light possible. Then what I also do like to do is like taking notes as much as possible on the profile, just because I work, like I said before, 2 years on the mission, but it was not like 2 years every day. It was like maybe like 3 weeks here, then you just do something else for 2 months, when you come back for a month, then you move to another mission. So you might actually have a lot of gaps between your iteration. So trying to be as clear as possible on the file, trying to like, yeah, here I have like a bit of like drawing just to say, hey, I kind of like this door and these elements. Because when you get back in the mission, you have like a bit of like work to do to know what you are doing. And so I'm really trying to make this process as easy as possible. Also because you never know what might happen. So if someone is going to help you in the mission, you also need to make the pure file or your mirror board or whatever as clear as possible. Here we have the first art blockade pass that I made based on the Admir design. As you can see, just cubes. I just scale around. I just had like a one specific mesh, I think. But the goal is to change the navigation to something that's a bit more like realistic and a bit more like nice composition wise, where we actually have a plan for the architecture, but it's like very, very basic. We just have the main shape. But the cool thing is like if you play the final game, you know that like this place actually looks kind of like the same, but like final with everything. Once we're happy with this first white box, I mean this first like art block pass, we can show it to the art director, to the lead. Here we're going to improve it and make the actual modules or the specific part of the architecture. So here we have the pillar, the arches, some stairs, some to have some like high differences. We have the reception counter. We have this like backspace here. As you can see, it's like very dark. So luckily for us, we have a flashlight. If we move to the next stage, we have the colored white box. This one is kind of like interesting because now we had like basically the PBR color of what we should have in the final material. So the pillar, for example, should be wood. So we had these dark wood materials. Really super useful because we don't change anything in terms of modeling, but now the colors make some elements stand out way more. And you can actually notice some issue if you just do this simple step. So for example, if we look, go back here, the reception here was kind of like massive, very important, so which is nice, but then the roll next to the reception like counter thing, not super interesting, right? It's kind of flat. You don't really see it with a gray white box, but with this version, it's kind of like very obvious. So what I did here is I asked for someone like help, so like the concept people that are like super good with designing stuff. And so Yena, she's like really talented concept artist here. She looked for references and she found this. I think it was like some kind of mention in Stockholm or something like that, where they have this like very fancy like wood paneling. Right, so it's not like in the US at all, but here what we really want to reproduce is like the feeling of the wood paneling, not the fancy modern furniture, but it's really just like this part of the wood with the lighting shining on the wall. So she made this very cool concept art based on what I had so far. She kind of like redesigned the whole reception area, and now I think it looks way better. And now what my job is kind of like to interpret her concept into 3D and to see how I can make it work. So here, I like to throw like stuff in the test level, so we don't have to care about like anything else than the actual modules here. So we have the reception, and just showing what like is going to work. I can show that to the art director and to the lead very easily. and then it's like a first cool pass that can be done very quickly. Then we have the functional pass. So now I kind of like integrated these like elements with this like new version. We have the dressing is a bit more advanced and it's kind of like improved. We have a better feeling for the space. We have kind of like also like change the colors for the walls, so kind of like works better. Also did like a first quick texture pass for the floor, following the concept, that kind of thing. Something that I like to do when I'm like feeling stuck also with the level, it's just like doing a quick like overdraw, like just drawing over the picture. You can see like it's very low quality concept art, even after like 5 years of like hard schools. But it's kind of like super useful because it's very quick and can just like draw props very easily on the environment and just kind of like unlocking myself if I found like I'm kind of like blocked with the modularity. I don't know what to do. So I highly recommend everyone to try that. Then we move to the next stage, which is like to the alpha, so adding materials. We didn't had any like dedicated material artist at Remedy working on on Highway 2, and but which means that when we take care of the level, we also have to do the materials on our own. So we took, as you can see here with the sphere, some Megascan materials, but we never try to take the like default Megascan, bringing it into the engine directly. We always want to bend Megascan materials to our needs, meaning that we would change the albedo, we would change the roughness, we would change the normals, we change whatever we need to change. But basically, the goal is to get like a working materials like within 2 hours, and using Megascan or like any like resources online. Actually, you can use like texture.com, anything else, just to speed up the process because we will never like ship the game if we are doing everything from scratch. And so here I have like a first pass on the floor, kind of like change a bit from the concept art because again the concept art might not actually solve all of your issues. And here when we have the previous version, it was kind of like tiling too much and it was kind of boring. So I'm kind of like trying here to break the space, having these like dark tiles towards the center, having the lighter one on the side. You can see the reflection. So I think all of that stuff come from Megascan, but that change the roughness and that change the normal maps. So it's kind of like serve our needs. You can see now we have like nice reflection showing the tiles. And then I did the same thing for the walls. The walls were a bit more like painful because as you can see, you have like the flashlight, which is like super strong on the walls, which is like an extra challenge to take into account because in most games you will not have like a flashlight or not as strong or not as like part of the gameplay of the story. So it'll be a bit easier to do, but when you have these kind of like elements to take into account, you need to pay extra attention to the material. So here this is like one of the first version, and as you can see, it's not great. It's not a bit boring looking reflection, so we need to improve on that. But as a first pass for the alpha, I think it's kind of like working quite nicely. Fun fact about Alan Wake 2, we had a live action set for like the cinematics of the Dark Place, which is kind of like very funny because I built the Oceanview in 3D with references, and then some other people in Helsinki actually built a set based on my work in 3D, which is like something that I never thought would be a thing, but apparently it was. As you can see, the wood patterning and the wallpaper, the floor, everything is inspired by. I mean, it's really based on the Oceanview Hotel. It's actually the same tileable texture, I think. And that was like super cool to be able to go on the set and just see all of the cool story elements that the people from the set actually made, because at the time on the game itself and I'm dressing, we were still kind of like very light and not very advanced. So that was like a huge source of inspiration for us, which is like kind of like unexpected and very much welcome. As you can see, it's all fake. And now that's the final version.
The entrance hall set the mood, where everyone had come in. The victim, the murderer, the detective. An idea, clear as a vision, waited for me here.
And I just added like some screenshots from like the earliest version that I could find to the final one, just to see the progress over this like 2 years, 3 years, which I think is always very fun to look at on a game. So for here we have the stairs with the final ones where you have the fade outs, the blood graffiti thingy, the fancy stairs. Here we have the ballroom made by the designer and how it turned out with the lighting, the VFX, and everything. One of the rooms, really cool, and the corridors, how they looked and how they look in the final game. Challenges.
So yeah, I hope this was informative for you. Our whole step, as you can see, it's like lots of iteration and back and forth, and maybe we haven't mentioned, but we also do like weekly art reviews with the
Yes.
whole team, and we usually sit with the lead concept art, and then the art director, and we kind of all sit together, and then we look at references and then the videos, and we play a bit of the game.
Yep.
And we try to have it weekly, and when we hit production and when things get more busy, we usually have it maybe twice a week. So yeah, we try to iterate a lot on our work.
Yep. That's how you can like really achieve the highest quality, I guess.
So now we're gonna talk about like some challenges. I'm gonna start with like building a believable world. One of the points our art director wanted us to emphasize for this project is using real world scale, which is using the actual scale of objects that we as human actually use in the real life. It has been a big part of creating an immersive game experience. We didn't do this in the past, as Control didn't allow us to have real world scale. It's an action game with high speed movements. So if you stare at the scale of props in there, they're quite big compared to Jesse. But since Alan Wake was a more grounded game with a slower gameplay and a smaller scale environments, it was easier to make the props and environment to a smaller scale and accept the challenge that everything needs to be realistic. And of course, this also applied to the size of the characters. Alan Wake is quite tall compared to Saga. It also applied to the player speed and our lighting metrics, the material we use, puzzles we made, and so on. As an example, here's our door scale and the base to our architectural kits. Of course, so this is like a 100 by 222 centimeter. I'm sorry, I didn't convert this in feet. But if you think of I was thinking if I said the scale in centimeter, it won't help.
Yeah.
It won't help for the feet. But anyway, getting to these metrics, well, you have Scaleman. Scaleman is 180, so it's like a human being. In 3D.
Yep. Scaleman savers.
But of course, like getting to these metrics is a compromise between level design, game design, and art. And we worked together to find something that could work for all of us. Art wanted something that would look realistic in the environment, and game designers and level designers didn't want the player or the camera or the enemy to get stuck in the door frame.
Yep.
I think we also needed help from code to make sure that the nav mesh could support this door size. But yeah, so lots of people iterated on this, and we came up with these metrics.
Yep. Maybe we can also precise that the like the character size are different, right? Because Saga is actually smaller than Alan Wake, because Alan Wake is based on the Finnish actor Ilkka, and he's actually quite tall, like almost 2 meters, I think.
Yes.
And so the character in game is actually also taller than compared to Saga.
Yes. Yeah, and you can see it in the environments if you look closely. So at this point, we started building things with real world scale. Scaleman is everywhere. Scaleman is outside, indoors, making sure that even the scale of the materials are correct. I personally often use Scaleman as it is easy to place him and see, because it does help to spot if props are maybe the wrong size, maybe also at least make you question if they are. Like in this picture, it was actually the right size because it was a kid's room. But still. And of course, sometimes it is hard to judge the scale from a screenshot because the FOV of the work camera in our editor is different from the game FOV. So we always recommend to play the game and test your changes in game. So on Alan Wake 2, we usually work in test levels like this. Like Jeremy said earlier, this is our building kit test floor, where you have a better is flat lighting is flat. You don't have to bother with anything else. It allows you to see what you're working on. It also allows others to see what you're working on and kind of be able to share some, because lots of things are happening, so it's like faster to have a look at something like this rather
Yep.
than reading something. We also have these test levels for props, vegetation, characters, and so on, so that same, you need to check something, you go there. One particularity with our old engine is that we didn't have thumbnail views on the mesh browser.
Mhm.
So yeah, you were always typing names, and everyone has different ways of
Naming things.
naming things. So this definitely helped us in many ways. So in this example, you can see Samuli, an environment artist from that I worked with, exploring like trailer house sizes. So you can kind of see that things are quite tight. So many things are challenging. Saga's banging everywhere. The camera is also banging everywhere, as you can see. It becomes quite a challenge to go around, and we were experimenting like the real world scale. And you can also see that putting doors in added an extra challenge for her to walk around, as it becomes kind of like an obstacle course. And also something to keep in mind is that all the doors in the end will be dynamic, so it would mean that they would react, they would swing, and it will be chaos. But I think the point of my video is that we like to test all the possibilities, give ourselves some time to consider all the options, explore as much as we can before committing to one layout or one size. Of course, we try to time box this, otherwise it just gets out of hand. And personally, in the beginning, switching from real world scale to was an interesting experience, because I came from Control, where you could build whichever space you wanted. It made sense, but you never saw the whole layout from outside. And the spaces were also so big. So going from huge to small into a more grounded environment, where the exterior and interior harmony was preserved, was definitely a challenge in the beginning. But it was fun to do something else. What am I doing? Yes. So after finding the sizes that worked for us, after iterating and discussing with level design, of course, an important part of making these spaces work is that we implemented a different camera setting for indoor spaces. So the camera is pulled closer to avoid constant collision with the environments, at all time maintaining the framing and the playability. Whereas when she is outside, you can see that the camera is a bit further away, so you have a better field of view of your surroundings. And I think this really helped when we had really tight space. I think it was also finding a balance between the furniture layout and the amount of props in the environment, that helped us achieve such tight space with the metrics we had. Also, like creating islands of props tied together with maybe some smaller props in the middle, some decals, also helped navigation in these kind of spaces. I think I skipped. So some learning so far. I would say don't be afraid to try a few options if you have the possibility. Like Jeremy did with his first step, grab a cube, try different options. It's always beneficial in the end. Test as much as possible your work. So we're making video games, so obviously, it's more interactive than watching a video or looking at screenshots. So I really recommend to always test your work, maybe get someone else to test, get it reviewed. Feedback is important. Remember the constraints you have. So yeah, in our case, it was real world scale. So, but real world scale to a limit that, we tried it, it didn't work. So we kind of made the space slightly bigger, but it's fine because it still felt realistic.
Yep.
And compromise is key. So as said, like real world scale, but yeah, it doesn't work. So
Yeah, no, I had like the same issue in the hotel. I was actually trying to go for like a realistic scale, and I was checking like on bookings the average size of like the hotel room. And it was like, I don't know, 20 square meter. And if you do that in 3D, like with a 5% camera, it was like a nightmare. So I think all of the rooms are more like 50, 60 square meter for just like a super room, which is like insanely big in real life.
Yeah, and I think if we didn't have the camera swap, because at some point in the beginning when we were developing, we didn't have that camera swap, it was also quite hard to appreciate the space that we were building. So if some space are more narrative, we would need also combat spaces. And with tighter metrics, it can sometimes be a challenge to find a nice combat space with nice combat and also in a believable setting. So I'm going to talk about the percolator ride in Coffee World. There was a lot of iteration to find the right ride that would look nice and feel fun to play with. At the same time, we were figuring out what we wanted to do with Coffee World. So things were changing a lot, and in the beginning, we wanted to do a sort of teacup ride, like a famous one in Disneyland, but themed around coffee. But because the designer I was working with, Kirill, wanted to do combats on it, kind of around it, and he wanted more verticality, it became obvious that the ride that I chose was maybe not the most optimal. So he first looked at putting some scaffolding around the ride, but it would have made the image quite crowded, and making a believable situation for those scaffolding would be challenging. So it was decided to kill the coffee cup ride, unfortunately, and finding something that would suit better our needs, but while keeping in mind that the ride should feel proportionally realistic. So while the level designer was prototyping with cubes, I was researching rides and fairs in the USA, and the tilt-a-wheel came to mind. So it's this bad boy. It had like verticality. The seats can act as covers and maybe destructible elements to make the combat a bit more dynamic. There's a possibility to lock the player in, as the ride has gating in its original design. And I kind of really liked the overall design. And I also liked the lighting, the lit up version. So I was thinking of our environments, which are quite dark. So I looked for rides in fairs because the one detail of storytelling that I really liked about Coffee World is that the Koskela brothers were not professional park designers, but they still wanted to create their own little Disneyland and Watery. So those rides were not meant to be placed there permanently, as they're supposed to be dismantled each time the fair changed city. So I kind of like this little idea that, they just, oh, this would do the job, I'm just going to put this here and use it forever and let it decay while people are using it. So I shared the reference with Kirill, the level designer, and he prototyped it with his cubes and placed some enemies, and we had already a first prototype. So as you can see, the side platform on the original ride is quite tight, but it still seemed that it could work. We saw some potential. It was definitely way more interesting than what we had before. In this prototype, he also tested like distances between cups and potentially how big was the cup. Thankfully, we got some support from VFX. I think it was Paul at the time, who created like a Whitebox destructible cup. It was very helpful to have this early on in the prototype, because we could see if it was like, something that could be fun, what would be the issues with this. And finally, the art prototype made it to the level, so we could test both the level design encounter and the art Whitebox asset, making sure that the metrics worked for both of us. Some timing to the animation of the ride was added to start visualizing the gameplay sequence. The enemy in the cup was added as the level designer thought having that enemy there as a centerpiece would make the combat more challenging. I honestly wasn't fully on board in the beginning, as I thought it was maybe a bit whimsical. Why is that guy there? How did he get there? But we found a solution to make it visually interesting. And anyway, making games is compromise, and if my level designer thought that it would add value to the combat and to the scene, then I trusted him to go forward with this, and then we continued with this. So at the same time I had finished researching and prototyping the ride, Jenna, our lovely concept artist, came up with some color palette and design for the ride's seats. I think it finished to tie together the ride we wanted as one of the landmarks in Coffee World. And it brings me to the topic of branding and visual identity, which is an important part of making a realistic and believable experience in Alan Wake 2. So we worked with a graphic design company called Laiha. They're based in Helsinki. They do professional work. Well, this sounds weird, but they do work for other companies, but they also do our graphic design
For games.
for games, which is also professional work, but well, you get what I mean. Because we realized that making 2D art and 2D branding, textures and everything in games, it's a really long process. And also having someone who knows like the job and who knows what it is to do branding was way easier. And I think we've been working with them since 2018, when they did the bureau identity for Control. So the way usually we do it is that when building the environment, we usually have an idea of what the buildings are, because maybe the narrative team had already suggested something, or after doing the reference pass, we have some ideas. For example, in this case, in this case, while building Watery, I had a pretty clear idea what the buildings were. It's a small town with Finnish heritage that used to have ties in the Finnish fishing and logging industries. So you could imagine that maybe the buildings, the town would have like boat warehouse, fishing warehouse, fixing boat area, a garage, because cars, maybe a restaurant because people who work in the town needed to eat, and Suomi Hall because it's the heart of the town where people gather and socialize around
Yeah.
the Finnish culture. So thinking of these buildings and like what the purpose is in this town was also a constant discussion with the art director and narrative to make sure that it fits the story. But we usually always have like a baseline when we start working on a location provided by narrative. So when there is a Whitebox and the reference pass is done, we gather most of the stuff in a Word document for narrative and writers to provide text and information and names, as we want to have meaningful text in the game. Again, for like creating a believable world, creating a good immersion for the player. And if you haven't seen Nazarino, our principal environment artist and lead on the main game, talk about the dark place, I think you will find it interesting because he also discussed this topic in the dark place. So for this brief, we try to gather as much pictures and references as possible, but sometimes it's also fine not to have any, as they can also come up with something. But if you have a specific idea in mind, then it's definitely a place to bring it. So for example, I wanted a mural, so I put like some references that I found on Google Maps. For the garage, I had this sign. I'm sorry, it's very small. I found this sign when we were traveling in the US, and I really liked the shapes. I really liked the font. I really like the whole look of it. And I thought it would be great to have it in Watery. So it gives them like a good base to start. And we usually add also like some pictures of the environment because one thing you have to remember is that they're external partners. So they don't have access to the build. They maybe don't really know what the game is about. So giving them like some information and some context is always helpful for them.
Yep.
So here, this is some branding that I got back from them. So the mural is amazing. I love it.
Yeah, super nice.
It's one of my favorites. Then we got like some the sign for the restaurant. This is the sign for the Suomi Hall, wall signs, some like Finnish poetry for Suomi Hall interior. So yeah, you get the idea. We get like a bunch of stuff. There is some visual treatment on the deliverables, maybe like some fabric or some plastic, something. It's just to from them to kind of show you their intention, like how they had thought of the asset that they're giving you. And we usually get like the Photoshop file so that we can just remove everything and just bring the image to Painter, Substance Painter.
Yep.
So there's also before we get this deliverable from Laiha, there's usually some iteration pass done with the art director. I think it's 1 or 2 rounds, but I'm not sure. I've not been in those reviews. And if we need some extra stuff, we have a Joker in-house, but we try not to lean on her, as she'd rather be doing concept art than 2D art. Oops, clicking everywhere. So Laiha is a very important partner for us. They've done also, like book covers. This is a patch on a vest. This is like, a sign in Coffee World. The sheriff badge, some logos, banners, posters from Cory the Cod to Achma beer promotion, or to like Dark Place, Hard Boiled, and Hangover Casey. And also achievements. I don't know if I said that one, but yeah, we have like more than 200 gigs
Yeah, a
of like
lot of
data.
things. Yeah. Mhm.
So as you can imagine, yeah, branding is very important in the world of Alan Wake 2 to create a believable world. And it was actually already something that the team in 2010, while making Alan Wake 1, focused on to make their world believable. So while tackling Bright Falls, it was decided to give Laiha the signs to update as well. So as you can see, like Bank of Bright Falls got an update. The building stayed the same. Bright Falls Diner building stayed the same as well, but the name change went to Oh Dear Diner. So yeah, the sole purpose of the building has not changed, neither did their position in the town, because we wanted people to recognize Bright Falls while revisiting the town in Alan Wake 2. However, some freedom was taken because sizes of the building might be different, sidewalks might be longer. You know, it's like I think Alan Wake 1 was released like 13 years ago.
Yeah, it was 2010.
Yeah, so it's like things might have evolved, and it made sense to do these updates, kind of like in real world, where you know, when you go back to your hometown, you go see your favorite street, and like some shops have closed, some have opened, some have changed name. Like it's a, I don't know, it's kind of it's a fun detail.
Yeah.
The sheriff's station has not changed, still the same. But you see, for example, the building below was kind of updated. There's no more like signs on the facade. They've been updated. They changed brand. So kind of what I was saying before, things have changed. And the freedom that I also mentioned was like, you know, okay, well, in this version, you know, things are stick together. In our version, well, we moved it. But to be honest, these are usually things that player won't notice. Except now, because I mentioned it, and I'm pretty sure people will notice it. But so yeah, we took some liberties also because downtown in Alan Wake 1, you couldn't walk, you couldn't explore, and downtown in Alan Wake 2, you can go around and visit. So this is downtown in Alan Wake 2. And as you can see, this is downtown in Alan Wake 1. And we just, you know, removed some buildings that were not very important for the story, and we kind of took the freedom to put something else that was better because it's 13 years later. But the heart of Bright Falls has remained the same. So some additional thoughts based on real life but more fun. Yes, we're making a video game, and it's okay to take reference on real life stuff, but if we were building real life stuff, we would be architects or interior designers, and but we're making video games, so I think it's fine to bend to your needs. Branding can be demanding. In our case, there was lots of it. Of course, we needed it because it's part of our visual identity. And then, you know, trying to make meaningful branding so that the players kind of are more like immersed. I think that's a French. So the players are kind of more in the the game. So branding also follows us from one project to another. We have the Remedy multiverse.
Yep.
And so we usually have, like, for example, Control had the FBC. FBC followed us to the Lake House and to Alan Wake. Lumi Vista might also follow us. I think Lumi Vista was in Control. Well, actually, I'm not sure on this one. And players don't always remember small details. As long as you have the big picture, I think, like, yeah, you can take some freedoms in your work.
All right, so yeah, we're like already 1 hour in, but there's like so many cool stuff to talk about in like two. So let's talk about the Bloodborne scene. So what are they? Very cool feature. Basically, you can enter a space, and depending on the space, obviously, you can change the story. So here, for example, we are like adding a clue in the story. The metro is dark, and now you have the light. The path is opening up. We can see some blood on the floor, some like pushed over trash can, that kind of stuff. So you're really going to impact the location and change the story. And depending on changing the story, you can open new path, unlock new clues, that kind of stuff. And the final result looks kind of cool, right? But the earlier version, not so much. So here, for example, we are back in the Oceanview Hotel in the ballroom. That was like the first default version. When we had the pre-show version, we had the haunted, the devil, and then I think the climax. That was the name. It's not super interesting because you can see if I go back in the slide, it's kind of like very minimalistic change. It's not super impactful. Obviously, the lighting does not change, which does not help, but it's not super nice. It's a bit like messy, and it was not like the best thing ever. So based on this like early learnings and this early test that we made for the functional milestone, like I was talking about earlier, kind of like come up with these guidelines. In the dark place since I work on almost all of them. So the first thing that I was doing is like reading the screenplay. Again, it's very important just to understand the story. Then I was taking notes into a PDF board to get like a visual representation. Then I was trying to, based on the screenplay, to understand what kind of like visual ID we can get from the story, and then doing a team sync with the other department to be sure that we're on the same page and we're all working towards the same version. So for example, here that's like the initiation 5 document. So it looks a bit like overwhelming, but basically we have like the screenplay in black, we have the states in different colors. I also write down some questions that I might ask to the designers, the narrative, the lighting, and then on in purple we have the visual ideas that I want to try for the environment. Since the story base, we also have a timeline that I'm trying to make. If you play the game, you know that the story is a bit cryptic. It's even more cryptic when you just have a screenplay, right? So we want to be sure that like we are understanding the story correctly, because we don't want to push the work too far and then think with the narrative and be like, oh no, you guys completely like didn't understand the story. So we really want to be careful about that. You also saw that there's like some like scissors because it was like a huge feature to tackle, and in some cases some of the scenes were not super relevant or super interesting, but like kind of like very optional. And so we took the liberty to cut some of them so we can actually spend more times on the most important one, and basically the one that the player are going to see the most. We also had some concept art support still from Yena. She kind of like made a lot of things for this game. When you're like a environment artist, sometimes you kind of like are playing with what you already have, but it's kind of like hard to take a step back and really find cool ideas. And when you work in more like 2D format, it's kind of like easier to just come up with stuff. And so she came up with like this design of like having these like lamps, these kind of like neons, I think the sign of the cult on the stage, all of that kind of stuff. Then we changed the plot scene, and now we have this red lighting. We possibly here have like floating object, but that was not a thing that we could do in the engine, so we don't have that. But it's kind of like trying to understand, okay, how we can take ideas from the concept and not like following everything, because the haunted seed, as you will see, that is actually quite different from this concept. But there is a lot of like similarity still. So here, for example, we have another one. We have blood corpses, we have blood, that kind of stuff. Another example, we have these like yellow tubes on the ceiling, and like, then they kind of like fall down. And then we have this like haunted, creepy look here. Small first iteration in this room where we had like the default state, then I just input the pre-show one. And we can see here that we have the lighting as a placeholder. We'll also have some design elements.
Why set up a play in a hotel? Why this hotel? Because the rent is cheap.
Very placeholder, but just still to get a good idea of the scene. Something that I kind of like notice here, as you can see, like if we have just a very small cosmetic change, it's not going like to be super impactful. It's not going to be super nice for the player. So again, like that's very early in the process. You can see that the UX of the board changed quite a lot. And yeah, I can see here very small change, not super interesting. I work on in the subway plot scene, which is like another level in the game. And here, actually, that was like the first plot scene that I think was really good, because you can first of all here we have this like ticket booth in front of you. You cannot access it, and while I'm trying to improve the plot scene, I kind of like notice that if you open new path for the player, giving him access to new areas. So here we have some decors guiding the player. Here we're opening the ticket booth, and now you have the narrative item on the inside and you can like listen to it, that kind of stuff. So we give like the player a reward for the exploration because that's like completely optional. Then you can go back, you can change the plot scene, and then the focus will shift like towards something else, which now makes them actually kind of like nice and interesting, and you kind of like are curious to check out all of them to just see what kind of like new path you can unlock. And here now it's like shifting toward this altar right there. And so if you go back to this one, that's like the final version. Now we don't have anymore this like weird, kind of like boring change in this corner. Now we have this like opening towards the gate. The idea is to basically open the path more and more as you progress in the mission. And now we have like this here corpses guy, and then if you input the last one, you will open the door. And also something that is like super important, always work with like the different teams, because the most impactful plot scenes, the one that are like the most interesting to me, is the one where you have all of the different components that really makes the games that are like in effect, right? So basically here we have environment art, as you will see, we have level design, we have like impact on the navigation, the gameplay, we have audio, we have narration, because we have like a small like cinematic before, we have the fight. So all of those different components of the Lego blocks of the scene are kind of like working together. Let's take a look.
It's getting real, all right. I recognized my writer's room on the stage. I almost dreaded the ideas this would conjure up.
You got here. What was the nice set you got here? What was the scene in this room?
Well, this is what we call the writer's room. In the play, it's where the devil rewrites reality whilst God is asleep.
All right. Oops, I'm just going to click here. I'm just trying to see if the actual webcam will come back alive, but nothing's kind of like that. Anyway.
Never mind.
Yeah, so yeah, let's go back to this one. So just if you like are curious to how this stuff works, very simple. It's basically we kind of have these streaming units, which is like roughly like a folder, right? We're just hiding and unhiding them by hand, so it's very like low tech, nothing fancy. If you have all of them enabled, as we have here, it's like super annoying because we cannot do anything right while we're working. So the goal is just to like hide them, only enable one, and just start to work on this one. Depending on the complexity, we might reuse some elements from like one plot scene to another for like a prefab. So if we update only one of the prefab, it will update all of them. We also want to make sure that the states between them and the different location are kind of like consistent, because we have like this pre-show, haunted, devil, and climax state. In this like early version, it's kind of like boring. We don't really see what is making them like linked together, so it's not super obvious. And so in the final version, we actually worked a lot more with the light artist, for example, to make something that is way more consistent. So if we look at the pressure state right here, we can see that we have this kind of like yellowish, a bit like thick yellowish color across the different pre-show scene. So if you use them, you don't even know. I mean, you don't even need to look at the UI of the game. You just know, but because it's like the same props, the same lighting colors, and the same elements that are being going to be used. If we change to the haunted state, then the haunted is way more like messed up. We have a furniture of like I've been thrown against the walls across the entire rooms. We have this like kind of like vortex decals on the floor. We have the red neon tube. Some of them are like echoing the shape of the cult of the world, as you can see on the left picture and middle picture. And the devil state kind of like trying to keep this like build up towards something. So we're keeping the red color, but now the neon tube, as you can see on the right, are like completely off. And now it's more like the moon, like it's kind of like corrupted, and everything is starting to be red. You now have like blood everywhere with like creepy word on the walls, and all of that stuff. Some learnings for the plot scene. So it was like a lot of work and maybe a bit too much. We, I think, underestimated a bit the feature and its scope. I think like the end result is super, super cool, but the amount of work it requires to actually get there was really super important. And that's why we want to have time to experiment, because if you don't have this time, if you kind of like, bit pressed or a bit rushed by the planning, then you might not get the best outcome of the feature, and it can maybe be frustrating for the player. So really having the time to try, fail, see what was not working, to be able to learn and to do better is super important, right? We really want to understand what works and what doesn't. And as if with like everything unknown when it comes to like video games, we want to be as much proactive as possible, because no one is giving you the solution, right? So if you stay there and just wait for the solution, you will probably not do anything. So being able to be proactive is super important. It's key in these kind of cases. And of course, as always, it's like a huge teamwork between the different people. So let's take a look at the final plot scene in the ballroom compared to the first screenshot that we saw at the beginning. All right, so that's not it, because we also have Lightshifter, because one mechanics changing the environment was not enough. So now we had two different mechanics, but still very, very cool. Actually, this one I think was even like better than the protein thing. Here you can actually grab the lighting. So if you have like blinking, you can grab it and or like put it back. And then it's going to open the way for Alan. So here we have the subway. It's like a dead end. You have nothing. If you put the light in the neon above you, then it's going to open the way forward. So it looks kind of cool when it's like it's final, right? It's done. But it was kind of like a struggle to get there, because very soon when we started to implement this feature, we understood that like it was very unclear for the player what kind of light was actually a light shifter, depending, because when you walk around, you might be like, oh, that's maybe a light shifter, but it was not. So it could be a bit unclear and leads to like some frustration. The first changes were, I think, a bit too huge, and during the user test, people were like, oh, I thought it was like some kind of teleportation tool, which was not the case, but because of how it was made, it was giving this feeling. So we iterate a bunch of time to get them right. They were a bit too like repetitive, because they were a bit too like random. Again, we can watch like Nazareno talk on the Dark Place, and you will have like some example. And also, since it's like the lighting is part of the gameplay, we still need to be able to have the light. We still need to be able to understand what's going on. So it's a lot of like layers on top of each other, creating all of these issues. But like I was saying, as like a normal artist, it was super, super fun to play around with. It was like a huge collaboration effort between like the level design, the environment art, and the lighting, and requires a lot of like iteration. So we had like a first idea, like, oh, let's try to do that. Iteration one, when it's like, oh, it's not working, let's try to do it a bit differently, and we can like go on and go on for like forever. Some of them actually had like way more iteration. If we take an example here, so for like the Oceanview Hotel, we had this like big sign on the outside building, and I was thinking like, hey, but what if we use a sign as like a light shifter source? I think the lighting people kind of like hated me for that, but we tried, right? So here we have the first version. You grab the light from the sign, then you change the environment. a lot of issues because the light shifter should be white light. Here we're just taking like a red neon. Then what does it mean for like the rest of the neon? Can you actually grab them or not? So we wanted to make this clearer for the future. So in the second iteration, it's a bit different. So now we actually have a better view on the hotel sign. Now we're only using the hotel word as a light shifter. We have the open windows, which was kind of like a bit annoying because you don't have any vista through the window. It was not super clear that the player could get the light. But here you start to have something when it's off. It's kind of cool. Even if the change itself, it's not super, super nice. It's kind of like boring at the moment. In the third iteration, now kind of like want to play a bit more with like the creepiness of the world. So just trying to make stuff that are a bit more scary. So that's why I had like this mannequin with the deer mask, just to play a bit with the expectation of the player. The environment, as you can see, is way more advanced. The hotel is kind of weirdly tilted towards the player because we want the player to notice it. We want player to be able to understand it's a light shifter, even if you have the UI at the bottom of the screen. But then here it's kind of like, oh, it's if it's supposed to be attached against the wall, then it's kind of like in a very weird angle, and that would be a very bad hotel room. So that was like kind of weird. But when you do the change, kind of like that we, but I had it like some mannequin on the outside looking at you again, trying to play with like the dark place, dreamlike logic, and trying to do a bit more like scary stuff. With this like fourth iteration, we also understood at this point that like having elements that are going to stay roughly in terms of shape from one state to another is super cool for the player to understand the change. So for example, here we have the poster in front of us. And since we're going to change the poster by a door, then it's going to be roughly the same thing. We're also like improve on the hotel signs, just trying out if it's going to work or not, if it's going to be not too weird. I think it's kind of like okay, so it looks a bit more like believable, but you don't have the sign in your face, and we still have this like creepy, creepy mannequin waiting for you outside. And that's the last final iteration. Let's take a look. And so unofficial guidelines for the light shifter, because based on what you saw here, we kind of like understood what was working, what was not working. So we kind of like came up with like these guidelines. So one was like it should be in front of the player. It should be obvious. We should keep it simple because we can get like pretty crazy here. So we want to keep like our creativity under control, so it's not too weird for the player. And again, we want to have a seamless teamwork with the other teams. So let's take a look at the first one. So in front of the player, that's like best example ever. It's like before the light was actually on the ceiling, but I was like, what if you use the TV? The TV is just the light, and then you do it, and then it's like semantic because that's part of the story. But it's very clear then for the player. Here, for example, the light shifter is slightly above you. You still see it, but it's not in front of you. But the change actually kind of like make it work, because then here it's like kind of obvious. Even if you're not looking directly at the change, you will still see it because we are really like surrounding the player with the change. So it's very obvious to see what is actually changing. Here we actually have like a nice joke that was an idea from like Carly, when I was designer working on the mission. She was actually, since we have this exit here, she was saying like, hey, what if we change the light shifter in the off version to have like a fake door basically. So we keep like the roughly the same element in place, like I was saying before, but it's kind of like super nice and kind of like funny to play around with the player. Here we have another one, which is like keep it simple. We don't need to do like a huge change every time, but here what we just did, for example, is like again playing with the expectations of the player and just had like enemies hiding in the shadow just to surprise you, because it's like horror game, so we want to have surprise and keep you on your toes. And the last one, the seamless teamwork. So here it's very It's a very complex one, which might not be like super easy to understand in the video. But we are part of the plot scene, like I was saying earlier. In one of the plot scene, we have a police car. So the police car is actually a light shifter, so it's part of the narrative, it's part of the level design, navigation space, and then we have like a puzzle to use the light shifter on and off to actually unlock the path. Take this door, go up. You have a seamless, invisible teleport, and then you end up on the roof. So all of this stuff, it's super important. We also have the audio, but I just muted the video for the purpose of the talk here. Final learnings. A lot of iteration still, right? Again, maybe a bit too much. Probably because the shifter was kind of like not very well, I wouldn't say like defined early on, because we were like unsure what to do. And so we kind of like came up with like a more like strict requirements later on during the production, which kind of like needed to rework some of the light shifter because there were a lot of like inconsistency, and a lot of them kind of like end up like being cuts or rescopes because of this new requirement to make sure that the player will have fun with the game and not being too frustrated, not knowing where to go. And I think that like as a learning, if we try to maybe like iterate a bit more on the feature beforehand, like in pre-production, maybe it's a better path to have like a more healthy iteration loop during the actual production. But still very fun to work on. I think the final result looks great. I will pretty sure that like, a lot of people will remember the game for like one of these specific mechanics, even if the artists probably have like PTSD until the rest of their day. So let's talk about some takeaways now, Lynn.
Yes. So yeah, I hope that you liked these first parts of the challenges we faced. So here are some takeaways. Communication. Sounds kind of obvious, but communication between team is key and is often overlooked. Sometimes, when you're in the heat of the production, I don't know, sometimes information just gets lost. People, for some reason, stop talking. There's like, I don't know. It's, in my opinion, it's worth like sharing more information than not enough, because also some people don't dare to ask questions. So yeah, kind of be sure to be proactive, and be proactive with the people you work with, your team, and maybe even more the level designer you're working with. And in our case, it will be also the lighting artist, because lighting had such an important place in here in Alan Wake 2. Teamwork between art and design. So when you're building a level, you need to be proactive and communicate with your level designer. The level designer I'm working with at the moment kind of called it a marriage. And I kind of really love the idea, because you need to talk to each other to understand the needs of your partner, and discuss and compromise to get the best experience, to avoid getting a divorce. And this idea really stuck in my mind, and I really like thinking of it as a marriage. Beware of the sentence, "It's just." So yeah, you probably heard it dozens of times, like as a student, when you started working, even now. But we kind of tend to underestimate how long something is going to take, because it's never, it's just, I mean, if I say, oh, it's just a couple of modules, or it's just a couple of props, or oh, it's just an extra room, I'm sure this rings a bell to some of you. And well, yeah, it always takes more time. And for example, like, yeah, we had one review where I think someone asked to move a wall a few meters, and it was like, oh, it's just a few meters, but behind that few meters is, the audio team might have placed their volumes, animation might have placed their animation, level design might have placed their trigger boxes, VFX might also have had put some particles. So as you can see, like, all these teams are part of the It's Just. So yeah, don't underestimate your work and task, and they always end up costing more time and effort than expected if you just go with like It's Just.
Yeah, and so kind of like to follow the it's just sentence, we also wanted to talk a bit about like time management, because it was for me like my first like triple experience in something that resembled more like an independent studio, where you don't you're not going to have any like support studio going to help you out to ship the game if you don't have time. And so you kind of like need to be super extra careful about like your energy and your focus and when you actually invest your time, because in a lot like you always want to achieve the best possible work, right? And the thing that is that it's not like always possible, and sometimes like good enough has to be enough, and you need to be able to understand the game and the level to be able to invest your time in the stuff that matters the most for the player, stuff that like the 80% of the player will see, and not getting stuck into like too like small details that might not actually have the same impact, right? So really having a clear vision of what is going to be the most important part is super helpful, because not everything, sorry, need to be like our station approved, let's say. And the last takeaway wanted to talk about is like the balance between environments in real life and in games, because we're not making real life environments, we're actually making games, which is very different because we kind of want to get ground like to have like a levels grounded as much as possible into like a believable environment, but still knowing that we are making a game, we are making like an artistic product, and we want to be careful not for like falls in like one of the two category. Like if we're going to do something purely like realistic environment, it might actually be too boring and might not actually be fun for the player. But if it's too much in the side of like the gamey aspect of the game, might actually be not super realistic, right? Be a bit like abstract. So we don't want to do either of those. We kind of want to try to like to quote like a famous writer, lean on the side of what is awesome. I think that's the best way of describing it. Really trying to think about, okay, what is fun? What do I want to keep from the actual environment in real life? Trying to bend it and making it like very cool, impactful, and then you probably will have like a very nice fun level, which will look
Believable funning.
believable funning. That's a new name. Let's go for that.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to us. We're super thrilled about doing this talk.
Yeah, it was super nice to you. If you're interested to join Remedy, we are actually hiring. So you just need to go to remedygames.com/career. I believe we are looking for some art surface artists and some lighting people. So if you're like interested and you want to join, feel free to apply. And that's it for us. And we can now move to the Q&A and maybe try to fix
Maybe
this
solve the
camera issue.
fail.
I don't know if it's possible.
I accidentally changed the light, teleported, and there was basically I was behind the wall and kind of like cut out from everything else, and I had to reload the level because it
Yeah, that's
wasn't
that could totally happen. Like it happened way more in during production.
yeah,
Uh,
we have a lot of questions kind of like around that, and
okay.
I am sure it was a nightmare just to test all of these scenarios and changes in the dark place.
Hmm.
But the questions that are we have here, there's a lot of them, so I'm gonna try to summarize. One of the question is like, how does the team composition look like for when you're building this theorist scene or something like this, in terms of like who's on the team and how do you people collaborate? So there's like a designer, a lighting artist,
Yep.
environment artist, texture artist. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yep. So for example, for the dark place, we basically had like, so in Remedy in the office space, it was like small room. So each hub of the game was actually a small room, and we were sitting next to like designers. So we had like 3 designers in the dark place. We were 3 environment artists in the dark place. We didn't had any like texture artists or anything like that. And we also had Inca for the QA. We also had um, Themoti, yeah, which was like for tech design. If we had any like weird issue with teleport or anything like that, so we really had like a small team of like different like disciplines to help us shaping the build the best looking mission possible. And that was the same thing for like Dark Place, Watery, Cauldron Lake, and Brightfall. We also had like what we call downstream craft, which is lighting, for example. Since they actually were not a lot of us just sitting in their own room,
in
and
the dark.
in the dark, in the heat of their like very powerful PCs. But technically, we could totally have joined us. I think we're just maybe a bit too much in the room, man, because they're not super big. But I guess that would have been the goal. Because if you're like sitting next to each other, the collaboration is way more effective. You can just say, "Hey, Anne, can you look at my screen?" And Anne will be like, "Oh yeah, what?" It's just showing the idea that you have the proposal.
One thing to remember also is that we're not sitting in a huge open space. So, like he said, it's like rooms that are like maybe for 10 people max. There are like some bigger rooms in the studio, but usually we would sit during production of Big Fish, Alan Wake 2. We would sit in those small rooms. For DLC, we sat in a bigger room, so it was also nice to sit with like programmers, the whole level design team, like producers. So it was a good way for us to also be able to
ask questions and talk about the
talk to
levels,
share information.
Yeah. And there was also like the art surface team, which is basically the one making all of the cool hero props that you might have seen on our station. And they were sitting not super far from us, so we could always check with them if we had any needs.
Kind of related to that is, I guess environment artists in the chat are kind of shocked that you basically had to build 3 environments or 4 environments instead of 1.
Yep.
And the question is, what about the deadlines and how does the timeline look from where you just have a block out to where you have a finished product? Like how much time does it take?
So yeah, it's a bit hard to say, I guess, but like I joined Remedy in like August 2021, and we shipped the game in October 2023, and basically until like September, we were like working on the game. So yeah, a bit more than 2 years. Since we are not like a huge team, I think we're what 10, 12 environment artists on the game. 14 environment artists. So it's not a huge team on the Dark Place. We were like 4 kind of like full time, and then we had like help from like Lynn, from Mikey, from like Samuli, so a lot of other people trying to like help. And for this like plot scene, that was like super challenging. So it was kind of like planned as like not extra, but like it was something that was elsewhere in the game. So it was kind of like super dedicated to the Dark Place. But then since it's kind of like I would say like core gameplay, very like iconic gameplay of the Dark Place, but we really wanted to take the time to get them right. So I guess so we also had like a lot of other features cut just to make some of them instead.
But yeah, I think something to remember is that if you plan those scenes, you basically have to take your schedules and then multiply them by the amount of times you need to redo the propping. So it times like in this case 5 times.
And depending on the plot scene and everything.
So I think also some ways to save time is like Jeremy, did this like keeping the same architecture base and just focusing on like bigger elements and like propping and not doing like huge structural changes.
Yeah, no, exactly. First plot scene was mostly focusing on the dressing, and I think the main challenge was to just know what you were doing, because actually making the plot scene like the defense dressing was not too much of an effort, because I know that like I could make one in like 2 or 3 hours, so that's like kind of okay. But that's basically once you understand what you need to do, what kind of props do you need to use, if you check with the lighting, with the design and everything. But once you actually have all of that stuff laid down, then it's kind of like okay. But all of the work that comes before, it's like that's the main struggle.
We have an interesting question from, I think it's West6518, and his question is like, how much of the pre-production phase was the art and design team coordinate with the marketing team with their approach to show off the game? Like, does the marketing have any say in what you guys are cooking or or not?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good
I
question because
I
I'm not.
actually don't know.
Yeah, actually don't know either. I don't think like the marketing had
Mm.
any said because we have like a very strong like directors with like
Mm.
Samlek, Kyle, and Yane in the leadership team. So they really had like a strong vision, a bit like weird vision. I mean, weird
Yes.
setting, right? If you
Yes.
play the game, you know what I'm talking about. And I know, but I don't think like the marketing will have any say to change the vision to make it more like marketable or anything like that.
I mean, I'm assuming that they give guidelines, but yeah, sorry, I'm not quite sure like what the answer is for this.
Yeah.
I think the answer is like that you have a very strong creative vision, and
Yeah.
then everybody else adapts to what you have, what kind of vision you have, and then sells whatever you have.
Yep.
So that's it.
Mm.
Um, I have another question, and feel free to stop me because the questions they just keep coming.
Yeah.
Um, from David Ruzika, I think it's a cool question. Remedy has a knack for figuring out how to include more unusual things like the musical numbers while
Yep.
still being grounded. And how does world building ensure these feel intentional, like they belong to this world?
I think we use always the same principle of like gathering references, doing our research. Um,
Yeah, it's kind of like people that work like remedies, kind of people that know what a remedy game is
yeah.
about. So it's a bit hard to like define, but actually when you work on it, it's kind of like not obvious, but it's easy to do.
Mm.
And again, like communication and all that stuff is super important. And
And
having like a lot of iteration because for example, when I work in the dark place with like Admi, Dimitri, Coali, Lucas, we had like a lot of ideas that didn't make into the game. But we're just like throwing ideas because that's like really what I like about Remedy. It's like it's a studio you can just like throw ideas during all the day, and people will be like, "Oh, whoa, what was that? That's really cool. Let's try to do that in game." So for example, like Lightshifter puzzles, we had like so much like iteration of like, hey, but what if you do that? Change the light, you have like the menu. On the menu, you have a price. The price is the code on the other side of the version. Lot of like creative, lot of creativity, crazy creativity.
yeah,
There are a
and
lot of, sorry.
sorry, I was just gonna add that we also have like you know, I think our art director has like a strong vision on what he wants, and he always says like he doesn't want anything whimsical. So he always wants things that are based on like references. We also have
Yeah.
like the reviews to check on the iteration. So it's kind of like a, you know, even if it doesn't look realistic in the beginning, you just work and iterate your work, and then you know build it up to where it is now.
So I want to touch on a couple of things you mentioned during the talk and kind of link this with some of the questions. So you talked about architectural kits and you talked about your mesh browser, which doesn't have thumbnails. I
Yeah.
for
Yes.
one, do not understand how you can work with it. And the question from the audience is kind of like about all the props that you have, like chairs, etc.
Mm.
Are they also using the mid poly and trim and tileable workflows to speed it up? And if you could just talk about how do you work with these little props and so on? Because Remedy
Mm.
games like Control and Alan Wake, especially, there's a lot of stuff in the frame,
Mm.
and it's interesting to learn how do you place it around, how do you work with it. Do you have a library that you
Mhm.
kind of operate, or you build stuff or buy stuff? How does that work?
Yeah. You want me to go? You
Yeah,
want to
you
go?
can go
Yeah.
ahead. I
Okay.
can add.
Yeah. So for like all of the props, it really like depends on the need. So we use heavily like Megascan in this project, which was I think the first one right, to use
Yes.
Megascan, just because it brings a lot of like very cool realistic props.
Mm.
So like a lot of the chairs were from Megascan. Sometimes we're actually like a bit like polish or like tricks by the fast people just to make them a bit more like efficient, optimized, that kind of stuff. Then we also had like a pass of like Whitebox, focusing on the location part that we wanted to have there. Then we made like a brief, we had references, and then we had like outsourcing studios making these specific props. And just combining these two, it's already like a lot of like stuff that you can
Mm.
add in your level. Then we also have Whitebox for that surface artist person themselves. So anything that is like let's say like hero props, remedy focus in terms of like brand props, I would say, like so control props, not props, like the handbrake lamp, the FBC control bow thing that you have in control length. So all of that's very fancy props are made by the Sottas artist. And once you use all of them in the level, then it starts to look kind of like nice. We want to be careful that like the like scan props don't stand out too much against like the mind-made props by hand, because sometimes it's a bit too obvious which one are scanned and which one are not. So we want to be careful about that so it does not stand out too much. And then towards the end of the production, we're like, hey, we kind of like need to have some additional props. I don't know, like snacks, office furniture, furniture like paper, folder, that kind of stuff. And so we bought a couple of like assets on different like websites, just to again speed up the process, because I think it's better to have like, I don't know, a speaker kit, for example, that we had in the talk show in the ballroom of the hotel, but not having them. And so we bought them, integrate them in the game. Sometimes the Surface people were kind of like trying to make them even better if they had time, and I was like, oh, well, I didn't expect that. That's very cool. And if we combine all of this like source of props, then we start to have like a lot of stuff on screen, like you said.
We also have props from previous projects that we could. We have like a database where we can grab them, download them to your actual project. So that also adds like quite a list of props. Of course, we don't use all of them because some are kind of becoming a bit like low poly, low resolution, and it might be more work to rework them.
Especially because with like the PBR workflow now, it needs to be like PBR friendly, obviously. And if we look at like props from Cushion Break, I'm not sure if it was using PBR.
No, and it's also the mesh detail is very low compared to what we wanted in Alan Wake 2. So, yeah.
There's a wonderful question from Shizar. Could you share a little bit about what you guys look in a portfolio breakdown to tip the candidate in favor of an interview stage? So kind of like, what are you looking for in the portfolios for you to kind of pick up that phone and make a call?
Well, I personally like to look at the general image. I like to look if there's like some storytelling. I like to see where the detail and attention is, like if there's some lighting, maybe like, you know, what is the mood. So I kind of like to browse the portfolio like this.
It's basically like trying to understand what is like the workflow of the person, because if they're going to join, they're going to be part of the game. So we want to be sure that like they are going to be proactive, that they know how to come up with solution. So we are looking for like strong art skills. So they actually know how to do texture, obviously, modeling, set dressing, all of that stuff. But then we're also looking for like soft skills, which is kind of like all the stuff that is going to be around the portfolio production, I would say. And so, for example, someone that is going to do a portfolio piece from scratch, just with like ideas that you might have seen on like, you know, Google Maps or like Pinterest, and trying to build the whole story, the whole mood, the whole architecture from like different pieces, and then getting at the end of the day like a very cool picture in only 5. That's like super nice. And really show that like you know what you're doing, and I think that's very like reassuring for the studio.
Because our pipeline is I mean, our workflow is mostly for building realistic environments. So we usually, you know, if there's references also or like steps, that's usually also a plus.
There's a lot of questions, so unfortunately I don't think we're gonna have enough time to ask all of them. So I'm just gonna concentrate on this last one, and I think it's especially interesting for games that Remedy makes. I think we talked in the beginning that you have a very strong technical base, and all of those games, they run on different systems, very fluent, you know, with great FPS and so on. And the question is like, how do you balance the visual fidelity with technical limitations? Are there some elements, tools, tricks that you're using in environment design that help you kind of like decrease the pressure on the hardware?
Yeah. You want to go in?
I was thinking of one because I often make this mistake is I open the field of view way too much in my levels. So I always end up having to kind of reassess a bit, like making sure that the camera doesn't see the whole level at once. Because even if we have streaming systems and hierarchy loads, things to make, the areas lighter, seeing the whole level is not great.
Yeah, for sure.
We also have like bunch of optimization tool, like checking the texture sizes.
Yeah, for the collisions, we're using like a rigid body system where you attach your physics to it. And for example, if it's like a dynamic object, it will kind of like be super heavy. So we want to be careful on how much we're using them. And I think at the end of the day, it's kind of like getting back to like working on the overall picture, because you can actually fool the player in a lot of ways, making them think that like, oh, this is actually like dynamic and what it's not. For example, in the cinema, in the dark place, we have a lot of like this movie like container thing where you actually have the movie reel inside, and some of them are actually dynamic and most of them actually not. They're just static. But once the player will actually like bump into one, then they will think like, oh, okay, so all of these objects are like now dynamic, which like give you a like for you you have a very well optimized, but then for the player it's kind of like feeling, oh, it's actually like very like advanced tech and and all that stuff. And so I think that's how we kind of like try to think about it. It's like, what is the details that are going to be the most impactful. I know that like for the trees, like I mean the vegetation, we had like some system we could actually change when like an object will like disappear, and so we can change these sliders depending on the object. So when you move around, not everything is going to spawn at the same distance, so it's kind of like blending the streaming very nicely, and then it kind of like gives a picture that stays very consistent, even if like there's a lot of like trickery
Yes,
around that.
with the tech design.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. The audience is super thankful. I want to thank from part of Noman, Anne-Lynn, thank you so much. Thank you, Jeremy. Also, big thanks to Naz who helped us organize this.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Amazing technical achievement, wonderful game. Super happy to host this. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, it was super nice to be able to work on that and to share it with everyone else. So if anyone has like any other question, feel free to like reach out on like LinkedIn, our station.
Yeah, definitely.
Email.
If we haven't answered your specific question,
Yes, we'll try our best.
Contact us. Of course, if there's too many questions, no guarantee that we will answer everything all at once, but we'll try.
It's an opportunity to do another stream sometime.
Yeah, we'll try to get the camera fixed for the next one.
Thank you so much, guys. And don't forget to check out Noman EDU for alumni stories, individual courses, and all the interesting stuff that we keep pushing every day. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next stream. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.